and we help co-organize these seminars. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for the day. Today we have Peter Furth. He's a professor of civil engineering at Northeastern University, where he does research in transit operations analysis, traffic signal control, and bicycle transportation. He has taught bicycle facility design and courses and workshops since 2007, including summer courses in the Netherlands introducing American students to Dutch urban planning and bikeway design. And he, for the past couple of years, he's been doing those in cooperation with Peter Furth and Portland State University. This year is closed, but if you're interested, next summer you can start planning on it. His bicycle-related research projects include studying the safety of along road bike paths in Montreal, mapping existing and potential greenways in the Boston area, network analysis of low-stress bicycle routes in San Jose, California, and analyzing the operational characteristics of different bike lane configurations. He is the inventor of the bicycle priority lane marking used in Massachusetts and in Minneapolis, and is contributing author to the Bikeway Design Guide published by the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter for his talk. Try to hold questions to the end, and when you do, so those of you who are new to the seminar live, we do webcast these, so if you do ask a question, we want you to use the microphone, hold the touch button, keep the red light lit while you're asking the question so people on the web can hear it. If there is no microphone working nearby, one of us will come around with a portable mic. Okay, take it away.
Differ in their tolerance for traffic stress. Most people, when they look at the image on your left, they see a nice quiet street with trees around there, hardly any traffic, and they say, I could see myself riding a bike there. The second image, you see there are some people riding a bike, so some people can see themselves riding there, but a lot of people look at that, they see a bike lane that's squeezed between a parking lane and a couple travel lanes. Some of those cars are about to be turning right. And they say, you know what, if that's what I have to do to ride a bike in this town, I'll just leave my bike in the garage. So, and here in Portland, your Department of Transportation has done some research. How many people are willing to ride a bike in different levels of traffic stress, and came up with classifying the population into these four groups. The strong and fearless who will ride anywhere, but they're a small percentage of the population. The enthused and confident who just need a little bit of protection from traffic, and then they're willing to ride. But the mainstream, the majority population, called these interested and concerned, they're interested in riding a bike. When they go on a vacation, they take their bikes with them because they want to ride a bike. But they're concerned. They don't feel safe if they have to mix with fast traffic or heavy traffic. And so in our research, what we've tried to do is take the same way that people differ and then say, well, what are the kind of bike facilities that people in the different groups will accept? So we've created four different groups. Divided the largest group into two groups, one for children and one for adults. So these are the very low traffic stress, and I'm using this LTS abbreviation, level of traffic stress. So a very low level of traffic stress for children and for traffic intolerant adults, and then level stress 3 for not as much separation or protection from traffic, and level of stress for the highest stress. And then I asked the question, what is the bicycle network for an individual? And there are many ways of answering them. I'll tell you four ways. One is to say, well, it's all the places where a bicycle is legally allowed to ride. I mean, that's your bike network. Where can you ride? And there are cities who say, you want to see our bike network map? Here's our city map. Here's a city street map. That's your bike network. A second definition is Every city, hopefully, has some facilities that they have, designed and for bicycling, bike lanes and some things like that. And naturally, they keep an inventory of those, so they could say, well, here's our inventory of bike facilities. That's our bike network. Another one is, if I'm trying to give information to the public, here are some good routes. Here's some suggested routes where you can ride. The places where we think is the best. It may not be that good, but it's still maybe the best in a certain corridor. And so that's the bike network. And for instance, the city where I came from, that's what the bike network maps are. But I'm going to start with a different starting point for what is the bicycling network. And we'll define it this way: the set of streets or path segments that an individual says, that doesn't exceed my tolerance for traffic stress. I'm willing to ride on those. And the others I'm not willing to ride on. With that definition, which I think is a definition that makes sense, we end up with a network that is very different from the kinds of transportation networks we're used to seeing. You end up with the possibility, now it doesn't have to be this way, but in many American cities it will be this way, that this network will be disconnected. That between where you are and where you want to go, there simply may not be a continuous route that you can follow without having to get on higher stress segments than you're willing to get to. So if you could map where the low stress segments are, and this is just what we did for the city of San Jose, later on I'll tell you how we classified them. But if you could map them, here's what the map looks like. In case you're familiar with San Jose, this is the Los Gatos Creek Trail, and the top of the area is the Willow Glen neighborhood. And what you see is there are there's lots of green there, lots of low-stress streets, but so many of it, there's just isolated islands. Johnny can leave his home, ride his bike around the neighborhood, but you just can't get very far. You can't without meeting a high-stress barrier. To make this even clearer, using GIS, we can just pick a starting point and say, and ask the network analysis, calculate for us all the points that you could get to on the really low-stress routes from the starting point. And every different color you see, we had to have a different starting point. So, for instance, you see San Jose State University. So, from that as a starting point, that brown area, that's where you can get to very low-stress routes from San Jose State University. San Jose City College. Every one of these is a different isolated network. You can't get from one of these to another without riding on a higher stress link. The shapes are interesting, like you see this very long, thin one. That's because it's an off-road trail. It's very nice low stress facility. Unfortunately, and likewise here, nice off-road trail, and the third one. Unfortunately, there aren't many low stress access points to get to those low stress trails. So we end up with islands. Here's a close-up of, now I'm going up to level of stress 2, thinking about the mainstream traffic-intolerant adult rooted at San Jose State University. If you were a student there, or you worked there, and you said, I want to live someplace where I can ride to school, but I don't want to have to fight with the high-stress traffic, you got a pretty limited area. The older developed downtown area, you got a pretty limited area that you could be. San Jose State University ought to have thousands of bikes parked there, and it doesn't. The city of San Jose, the bike share for journey to work, 0.6%. If you compare that with Portland, or a couple of cities that I also visited recently, Eugene and Corvallis, the bike share is much higher, and I think I figured out why. It's because it never rains in Oregon, and in California it's... No, you don't think that's the reason? No, I think the reason actually has more to do with traffic stress. So, and then here are what the stress islands look like. If people who are willing to go up to level of stress 2, still you have these different islands. You can't get, for example, you couldn't ride a bike from San Jose State to San Jose City College without having to get on some high stress links to get between those islands. We could have made more islands. I mean, the white space could be filled in with other colors and so on. The city becomes divided into like ice flows in the Arctic. You're on one island, I'm on another one. We just can't get between each other because of there are these higher stress links that a person doesn't want to use. So now when it comes to connectivity, we define connectivity as, can you get from here to there without exceeding a certain level of traffic stress. So we could pick a level of traffic stress, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, bring in that subpart of the network that doesn't exceed that, and then ask, can you get from here to there? So as you've seen, sometimes you simply can't get from here to there. Sometimes, however, like these 2 points, you could get from here to there, but the route that you have to follow is so circuitous that most people they just wouldn't consider that as a possible route. Or here's another example. Can you get between these 2 points, staying on the low-stress routes? And if you look carefully, yeah, if you go north about, 3/4 of a mile and go across and then come south, you could. But most people would consider, I can't get from here to there. And so in addition to the stress criterion, we had to introduce a detour criterion. 2 points are, therefore, we say they're connected if you can get from here to there without exceeding your level of traffic stress and without undue detour. The detour criterion we used, and there's a little bit of research to support this, though it's of course, there isn't any hard, cliff drop off the edge of the cliff boundary, is that we shouldn't expect people to go more than 25% out of their way to go on a low stress route. Most people would just consider it's just not available if I have to go that far out of my way, or for very short trips, instead of a percentage, just a fixed amount, 1/3 of a mile, which is about 2 minutes extra travel time. All right, now, where do we find our criteria for level of traffic stress? Well, there are a couple different sources. One is there's a body of American research that's gone into developing bicycle level of service and a similar model called the Bicycle Compatibility Index. And it's used by consultants sometimes. It's now been made part of the Highway Capacity Manual, multimodal level of service method. There's a practical reason that we couldn't use that for this research, which is that it's just too data hungry. It needs a lot of detail on lane widths and traffic volumes and traffic speeds that we didn't have. But another reason is that while it ends up classifying streets by level of service A, B, C, D, E, and F. So 2 problems with it. One is we don't know what level of service we need to serve the mainstream population. Is it a B? Is it a C? I don't know. Is it an A? It wasn't set up with a clear boundary like that. A second reason is that it's kind of a black box. I couldn't take you to a street, show you the street, even give you numbers, and here's what the daily traffic is, and here's what the speed is, and then you tell me, oh, okay, I see, this is a level of service B, this is a level of service C. You wouldn't know. You'd have to say, I need to use my calculator. It's a complicated formula. It's kind of a black box formula. So these designations, A, B, C, D, and so on, they have no meaning to anybody in the public. They don't really even have meaning to most people in the policy world. And then in addition, there's a lot of stress that happens with intersections, which that method doesn't cover so well. So another source of criteria, which we did resort to, was, well, let's just look at what the design criteria are in places where they have succeeded in reaching the mainstream population. And that'll tell us what the mainstream population needs. So I relied heavily, therefore, on the Dutch criteria. In the Netherlands, they have succeeded in getting the mainstream population to ride a bike. 80% of the population rides a bike once a week or more. The bicycling is all ages, lots of seniors are riding, lots of children are riding, men and women are riding in more or less equal shares. I also looked at bikeway design criteria in Davis, California, another place that's been very successful in getting the mainstream people to ride, and some other things to adapt the Dutch criteria more to some American realities that we know about. So I developed this new scheme, level of traffic stress 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I've mentioned earlier, which are deliberately meant to be mapped to these different sectors of the population for their tolerance for traffic stress. This scheme is anchored at level of stress 2, being the level that the general adult population, the general traffic intolerant population would accept. And it's based on Dutch criteria, as I said, with a little bit of adaptation. A little stricter criteria for level of traffic stress 1, meant for children. In the Netherlands, you won't find anything written. You won't find any official policy about, well, here's what we put out as general bikeway stuff, and then for children we try to do this, but they do. For children's routes, they have they try to even make the stress even lower. And then the higher levels for level stress 3 and 4. And in this research, we developed and applied criteria not only for segments, but also for intersection approaches and for crossings. With this concept of people will only be willing to ride on a link that doesn't exceed their tolerance for traffic stress, it means that the traffic stress of a route is based on the weakest link principle. It's based on the traffic stress of the worst, the most stressful link. So here I might have a nice route, level stress 111, but there's this one bad segment. If it was travel time, you would just add up the travel times, and you'd say, well, this section takes a long time, but just add up the travel time. But with danger, adding or averaging isn't the right way to go. People don't say, well, most of the route's pretty safe. This is one place where I feel scared to death, but when I average it out, with the places that I feel relaxed, overall it's a very nice route. No, it's more that weakest link principle, and so that leads to some interesting analysis. So the kinds of bike facilities that we develop criteria for are standalone paths, segregated paths, bike lanes, and mixed traffic. The standalone paths and the segregated paths, they're easy because you're separated from traffic stress, so they have a low stress. Bike lanes and mixed traffic, however, they can run the whole gamut. You can have a nice low-stress bike lane. There's not too much traffic that passes you. It's going slow. It's so wide that you're not worried about being doored on the right. You're not worried about being hit by a car on the left. But I can also have bike lanes on 55-mile-an-hour highways. Do I have a? I thought I had a link in. I meant to have a link in here, but if anybody wants to stick around later, I'll show you a bike lane on a 55-mile-an-hour highway with two 55-mile-an-hour lanes to the right of the bike lane, 4 55-mile-an-hour lanes to the left of the bike lane. To get into this bike lane, you merge across a lane of 55-mile-an-hour traffic. Okay? This is a bike lane that is 100% in compliance with engineering guidelines, national and state guidelines. This is in California. 100% in compliance. And I would call that a high-stress bike lane. Not many people are willing to ride in that. Likewise, mixed traffic. I mean, mixed traffic on a quiet local street is very low stress. Mixed traffic on a busy street can be very high stress. So that's why we need criteria. So this is too much to study here, but here's a summary of the Dutch criteria. You can find something like this in the Dutch manual, but the Dutch manual, the Dutch people wrote it for themselves, and then they translated it into English. And there are things that, like, every Dutch person knows that are like, wow, and this is new to Americans. So I enhanced this with some things that are obvious. But if you just stick with urban, and here's also urban, And what you get is the lowest stress here, mixed traffic. Then we have a zone, which they say, well, in these situations have bike lane or a cycle track. And then we get to a zone. Here you really need separation, physical separation, have a cycle track. What's very interesting is the boundary for this bike lane zone with 2 lanes, 1 + 1. Once you get to more than 2 lanes, multi-lane street, don't have bike lanes. That's their guideline. Just have a separate cycle track. Now, they actually have multi-lane streets that have bike lanes. They aren't building any new ones. And they actually work pretty well. So that's why I made our criteria a little bit looser than the strict Dutch criteria. You'll also see another interesting thing is, here I got traffic volumes. And traffic volumes are important in their criteria for when you're in mixed traffic on a low volume street. When traffic is nice and low, the cars, and the road doesn't have a center line, cars tend to ride right down the middle of the road, and they basically leave the sides of the road for bikes to ride in without much fear. But as traffic gets heavier, then they start to act like it's a 2-lane road, and now there's a conflict every time a car wants to pass a bike. But once we get out of there, with these multi-lane roads, they don't care about the volume. It's not the volume matters, but it's the number of lanes that matters much more than the volume. And American studies, when they've looked at like the bicycle level of service, they put the emphasis on traffic volume. I think the emphasis should be on number of lanes. There's a quality of riding a bike along a 4-lane road compared to a 2-lane road. Traffic is more turbulent, more unpredictable. When people look, when drivers are looking to see, there's just so much more to see, they might not see you. Okay, the only serious crash I had myself as a cyclist was on a 6-lane road. There was a car waiting to turn left. I was in one of the 4 lanes coming against him. The car driver waited till all the traffic was gone and then made his turn. Well, all the traffic except me just didn't see me at all. I mean, he was looking, waiting. So the criteria that I've proposed, and the network analysis results that I'm going to show, they could be used with any set of criteria. And I'm always interested in hearing feedback that, hey, maybe you should relax this one, you should tighten this one up, take into account this effect or that effect. But here are the criteria that we used in this research. There are for bike lanes alongside a parking lane, we have criteria in 4 different dimensions. And for each of those dimensions, here's what you can have. If you exceed that, then it's a higher level of traffic stress. So for one that I know a lot of you probably think about is, well, how much space do I have? So we're looking at the sum of the parking lane width and the bike lane width, and if there's a buffer, add the buffer in there. So the total reach from the curb. And if you got a lot of reach, then you can ride, just relax. When you ride a bike, you do kind of wobble, sway side by side. It's actually unavoidable. And the more you can wobble, the more relaxed you are. There's nothing like riding, relax, riding like that. So as it gets tighter, you have to try to stay, I can't go too far to the right. I might get doored. I can't go too far to the left. I might get hit by a moving car. And so if you want to be level traffic stress 2, you got to, give at least 14 feet and that sort of thing. Then the way these things accumulate is also by the weakest link principle. So suppose I have a street that has these 4 characteristics. It's got 1 lane per direction, 13.5 feet or less for the bike lane reach, and so on. Well, by bike lane reach, sorry, you've gone beyond the criteria for level stress 1 or 2. You're 3 or higher. So 3 dominates, so that segment will get classified as level of stress 3. For a bike lane that's not alongside a parking lane, here are the criteria. Because there's no threat of parking, it's the criteria a little more relaxed. And I've got level of stress 1 for a bike lane with traffic with a speed limit all the way of 30 miles an hour. Some people might say that's too much. It should only be 25. So like I say, the criteria can be can be adjusted. I'm glad to hear feedback. I didn't want to make the criteria too strict, or people would say, well, your results are, it's only because you made the criteria so strict. You can never meet that level of service. That's why nobody can get from here to there in your model. For mixed traffic, some of you may have seen a graph like this before. Well, the Dutch one was sort of like this, where the lowest stress is in this corner, and then we get higher and higher stress as we go down to the lower right corner. And the main dimensions are how many lanes is the street, more lanes, more stress, and then the speed limit, higher speed limit, more stress. Of course, people always say, isn't actual speed more important than speed limit? Of course it is. If you can get data on actual speed, use that. San Jose, the actual speed and the speed limit are very well correlated because it's a practice there to adjust the speed limits based on how fast the drivers are going. Drivers, you want to go 35 miles an hour and you're going 35? Okay, then we'll make the speed limit 35. And they have very, very finely graded speed limits, so they really actually reflect the speed people go. And then the footnote here is important. This little footnote A, are we going to be level stress 1 or 2? In this category, we're going to be 2 or 3. And we use the lower value for streets without marked center lines. Marking a center line on a street just makes the street more of a traffic channel. It takes away the idea that cars are expected to share space with other cars. And now when they have to share space with bikes, it just creates a little more stress. Whereas with no center line, we're saying, hey, cars, you got to share space with each other. And then sharing space with a bike just is more natural and works out better. Now, next, we want to tackle intersection approaches. In San Jose, where there are bike lanes, often it's the approaches to the signalized intersections that introduce the high level of stress. So in this example here, I got a bike lane. It's all right. And then the bike lane just disappears because there's a right turn lane. Now, I'm not sure. It may reappear behind this white car. But even so, the bicyclist now has to enter a traffic lane, look over their shoulder, weave with traffic, and so on, until they can finally get to the safety of the pocket bike lane. Well, the Dutch criteria for a pocket bike lane, they have pocket bike lanes there. Their criteria are, first of all, the right turn lane, the turn lane next to it, has got to be short. Why is that? It's so that the traffic on the side of you where you're not used to having traffic shouldn't be going fast. I'm used to riding my bike next to a parked car. If the traffic next to me is going the same speed as me, well, then they aren't passing me, and that's okay too. But if the traffic on my right is going 25 or 30 miles an hour, which they could if you have a long turn lane, then that's frightening. Actually, in Delft, there's a right turn lane like that. Do you remember that? Kirk, or any of you guys on going on the way to the university? Yeah, it is sometimes distressing. You're in this pocket bike lane, and this bus goes zooming by you in the right lane. So not everything over there is such low stress. The right turn lane, very importantly, it should begin abruptly, and while the right lane continues straight. So it should be obvious who's got the right-of-way, that the bikes have the right-of-way, and it should be obvious to the motorists who are turning right that you are leaving your lane. You are crossing another lane because it's built into our driving. Whenever we change lanes, we know we have to look and yield to who's there. And then the intersection angle should keep the turning speed low, so if cars they're going to be going slow at the end, they're yielding when they enter, it's going to be a low-stress turning lane. And so we develop these criteria for pocket lanes. If you meet all those criteria, bingo, you get level of stress 2. And as you start to relax or violate some of them, it becomes a little bit higher stress. Still satisfies our enthusiastic bike riders. Like I can mix with a little bit of traffic that's not going too fast. But where we have dual right turn lanes and that kind of thing, then it's very high stress. So here's an example of a street in San Jose, Monroe Street. It's a very nice street for riding a bike because just off the picture, there's a freeway and there's a pedestrian overpass, but there's no overpass for cars. So this street has very little traffic on it, Bikes can come through. But as you approach this intersection, all of a sudden it turns into 3 lanes. Right turn lane, through lane, left lane. Where's the bike supposed to go? Who wants to go through? Same thing in the other direction. So this is an example of one weak link that ruins a whole route. Now, the good people of San Jose, they didn't do this because they said, how can we screw up this bike route? Ooh, I got a good way to do it. No. They just said, well, we want to reduce delay for cars. Cars are queuing. How can we help the cars? And it simply is just a fact of life that when you adapt streets for cars and don't think about bikes, you will often make things worse for bikes. And inadvertently, they've made things worse for bikes all over the place. And here's an example. Here, just for an example, Area A. Here's my nice low-stress Monroe bike route. It's a pretty long thing. Here's the freeway overpass, pedestrian overpass. But here's this bad high-stress segment, and that kind of ruins the route. Then another issue was the stress at crossings. So here I got a busy arterial, Winchester Avenue. And here I got a nice, low-stress, quiet neighborhood street, Rosemary. Comes in on the west side, comes out on the east side. And it looks like, wow, I got a great low-stress route there. I'll just ride my bike along Rosemary. Only problem is, to cross Winchester Avenue, this is what you're facing. Here's Rosemary. You can come in, just cross that, and just low-stress. Well, no, that's not quite a low-stress crossing. So we had to introduce criteria for crossings. If it was signalized, we said that's fine because, kids, adults, we know how to wait until we have a green light and then we can cross. But for unsignalized crossings, it is a wonder that in America we don't have strict criteria for unsignalized crossings. In the Netherlands, in Germany, in most European countries like that, it's very clear. Pedestrians should never have to cross more than 2 lanes. Period. So that means the widest a road could be is 4 lanes. Then you can have a median refuge in the middle, and they're never crossing more than 2 lanes at a time. You go more than that, sorry, you got to have a traffic signal any place you want pedestrians to cross. So as the number of lanes gets higher and as the speed of the traffic on the street that you're trying to cross gets higher, then those 2 things work to get you from a nice low level of stress up to a high level of stress. Crossing 4 or 5 lanes of 35-mile-an-hour traffic. A lot of adults would say, well, if that's what I have to do, to get to work, I'll do it, And let me say something about stress. I grew up in America, and I'm a person who loves riding a bike, so I just rode a bike all the time. And I used to wonder, why don't other people ride a bike? Just suck it up and, get out there in the streets. And then I went to live in Holland, 1997. And for the first month, I couldn't get used to the Dutch way of riding a bike. I kept thinking, what's wrong with these Dutch people? They're so slow, and they're yakking, talking with one another. I had learned to ride a bike like an intense racer. When you're riding, there's only one thing you think about, and that's riding. You're constantly thinking, oh, there's an intersection up here. Is there anybody coming out? Anybody over our shoulder? Better shift my position over a couple feet here. Is there any debris in the road? Watch out, And you're riding as fast as you can because the stress is high and you want to get the hell off this road as quick as you can. And when I got over there, it took me about a month to decompress. And after a month, I realized I don't have to think about riding a bike. I can actually enjoy the scenery. I can think about something going on at work or at home. So it's nice having low stress. Okay, so we came up with a method that when there was a high-stress crossing, that stress would then apply itself to the streets coming to that crossing. And now this is what the network map looks like. And so looking on this network map for a low-stress crossing of Winchester, you're not going to be deceived and think you can do it along Rosemary anymore. And you can look and say, well, where's there low-stress crossing? There is no place Well, here I got a level of stress 3 crossing. Finally, one place that you could cross for level of stress 3. Pink is level of stress 3, sorry. But if you want level of stress 2 or lower, which is blue or green, can't cross Winchester, not in that section. So we did this for the whole city. We got the data from Standard Streets database that gave things like number of lanes, total width of the street, and speed limit and functional classification. For the streets that had bike lanes, we had students measure the distance from the curb to the edge of the bike lane for that one criteria that was there. That was the one intense part of data collection that we had to do. And green is the lowest stress. Most of the map is green, isn't it? There's a lot of green in there. A lot of low stress stuff. As a matter of fact, 64% of the miles in that network is green low stress. But the problem is that those low stress things don't connect to one another. And that's not an accident. That's part of what makes them low stress. They aren't connected very well, and so cars can't go zooming through your neighborhood. So it's often going to be this way, that your low stress streets aren't connected well with each other. So you've already seen this. This is what it looks like if you only look at the level of stress 1 segments. Now I add level of stress 2. There aren't too many of those, but a little more connectivity. Some islands get connected. If you're willing to ride level of stress 3, you have more options. And if you're willing to ride on level of stress 4, you can go anywhere. I like to show that sequence in reverse. Here's the whole street network. And you say, oh, I won't ride on those level of stress 4 streets. It's just, way too stressful. Okay, well, you just lost a lot. Here's what you get. And then somebody else says, well, there's a lot of, maybe some bike lanes on some busy arterials. I don't feel comfortable on those. Show me only where it's low stress. Okay, well then you lose all that. And this is what you're left with. This is fragmented network. You can't really get very well from here to there. What are the barriers? It's interesting to look at. The barriers include your standard linear barriers of rivers, railroads, freeways, and so on. But also, as I described with Winchester, arterials that lack this combination of low-stress approaches and low-stress crossings. They have a lot of low-stress approaches, local streets coming to the arterial, but where they arrive, they don't have a low-stress crossing. They have a lot of low-stress crossings everywhere there's a traffic light, but the streets coming to the traffic lights have high-stress approaches, turning lanes added and so on. So that combination is hard to do. Here was a good example I was happy to find. In the older parts of the city, the older freeways, they made it a point to build these footbridges, a nice circular ramp connection. This road here is a great street to ride on. It's got no traffic because there's a freeway that's blocking all the car traffic. And a bike can go right through from this street, zip around, and continue onto that street. It's very nice. So here are the level of stress 2 islands. You've seen this picture before. And now I want to show what would happen if certain links were added. And you can, easy to see where to pick a link. You'd want to add a link somewhere up here to connect these islands. Add a link to connect these islands. Add a link here. So we came up with a slate of improvements. I forget how many, like 32 miles worth of connections, many of them little short connections, little jogs, crossings that can be made safe. And if those improvements, as well as a couple long cycle track improvements where there was no possible route on the low stress streets, and with those improvements, here's what the level of stress 2 island based at San Jose State becomes. Now all those islands, so many of those, not all, but many of those islands are now connected. You can get from here. There's a great picture, isn't it? You can clap. I think this one is worth clapping. This is just terrific. Wow! Now I can really get from here to there. Now to quantify it, here's the measure of connectivity we used, and now I'm going to have to rush because I'm near the end. The percent of trips that are connected by level of traffic stress. So we got the home to work trip table. How many people travel from home in a zone I to work in zone J? And with this network analysis, we're able to figure out, is I to J, can you make it at level of stress 1? Can you make it at level stress 2? Can you make it at level stress 3? And then we could simply add up all the trips that could be made at a low level of stress as a fraction of all the trips. And skips through some of these, and here's the result. In the existing network, let's look at this. For trips up to 6 miles in length, for level of traffic stress 2, which is our mainstream population, only 4.7% of homes and work locations are connected at level of stress 2. So maybe it's not such a wonder that only 0.6% of the home-to-work trips in San Jose are being made by bike. With the improvements that we've proposed and that improved connectivity, that goes up, doesn't go up quite to 100%, doesn't go up near 100% because it was a pretty modest set of improvements. But it goes up by a factor of 2.5 or 3. A lot more connections, and therefore we would expect a lot more bicycling. So this becomes a tool that you can use to evaluate what's the benefit of maybe this set of improvements versus that set of improvements. Maybe one critical connection might cost a lot of money, but it might leverage the good low-stress network you have on one side plus the other side and now create connectivity that so many more people can get to where they want to go. So that's the end. I want to acknowledge my co-researcher who worked on this with me, Maza Makuria, a recent PhD graduate from Northeastern who's now living in San Jose. Financial support was from the Mineta Transportation Institute in San Jose. And with that, I'm ready to take questions. Okay, and people who are offline, I guess you know how to send in questions.
Yes,
and
they come in via email.
Professor Dill will handle those. Yes, sir.
So you definitely convinced me that this is an awesome set of criteria, but is this being widespread in other places, or it's just kind of through your firm?
This is new. This is new. I mean, this study hasn't even been published yet. So the idea of having some criteria for level of stress, the bicycle level of service, those criteria, they've been around for almost 15 years now. But like I say, it's too complicated to just get through to the public. These are criteria that are just nice and simple, you know. And like, you want to be level of stress 2? Well, the speed limit better not be more than this. You know, the bike lane better be at least this wide. The number of lanes better be not more than this. You can remember what all those things are. You can look at a street and right away and say, oh, this is level of stress 3. This is level of stress 2. So I'm hopeful that cities and consultants who do work in this area will find a classification scheme like this useful and do something with it. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm fascinated by the methodology, and I hope Roger's going to apply it to our network sometime very soon. My question is about what I call the last quarter mile problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously our bicycle boulevard network here in Portland that we're putting a lot of investment into is intended to be low-stress bikeways. Typically, that looks like a neighborhood street parallel to the major arterial,
Yeah.
right? But if the grocery store or the health club or whatever your destination is on that major arterial, you've got the problem. How do you get from the low-stress bikeway to the place you actually want to go? You can get within a quarter mile of where you want to go, but that last quarter mile can be a barrier. And
Yeah.
have you encountered that in your methodology?
So the way our methodology accounted for it is if you had a destination that was in a certain block, if you could get to any point on that block, you could get there. Because what we figured is if your destination was, for instance, on the busy arterial, but you could get to the quiet street on either side, well, then you could just ride your bike on the sidewalk for the last half a block, or walk your bike on the sidewalk for the last half a block. If people knew that, look, if you know, from leaving my home or leaving my work, all I have to do is walk 2 minutes, or ride a bike 2 minutes, you know, slowly, sort of staying out of trouble, and then I can relax in a ride. We didn't think that would be enough of a barrier to account for. So Yes, Roger.
Thanks, Peter. Great stuff. Two questions for you. First is, how would you classify under the system our downtown one-way grid? You know, just based on what you've seen. Mm-hmm. And then to go back to some of your earlier research about shared lane markings and I think priority lane markings, how do you see something like that fitting into this kind of system?
All right. So the shared lane marking question. A couple of years ago, I was pretty excited about the bicycle priority lane, that it might be successful. The research that we did with it showed that it has not been as successful as we hoped at making bicyclists feel like they can just get out there in the lane and block cars. There's just something fundamentally, I don't know, if it's unconstitutional or if it's against some natural law of physics or if it's against, I don't know, there's just something fundamental that when somebody is slow and there's somebody behind them that wants to go fast, you want to get out of their way, and they want you to get out of their way. So I didn't account for shared lane treatments having any benefit in this. If it turns out that they work, if we have one that works, or if maybe in one city they work and in another city they don't, you can always modify the criteria. Now, your question about the downtown grid, that's a great question. Let's go to the graph. Here. Oh no, that's crossings. Here, criteria for mixed traffic. So what's the speed limit? Lower than 25. If it's 2 or 3 lanes,
all in one direction.
if it's 2 or 3 lanes, now these are not for streets without marked center lines, so then it would go to level of stress 2.
So these are one-way roadways, so 2 to 3 lanes, generally 3 lanes in one direction of travel.
Yeah, once it becomes, I didn't specifically think of criteria for one-way streets, and it's a question. A one-way street with 3 lanes, is that the same as a 6-lane road? Well, in many respects, heck no, it's totally different. And in Holland, they don't have any one-way streets with 3 lanes. Just does not exist. The thought is like totally foreign to them.
So what about just based on your experience?
Based on my experience, okay, so my experience riding on those streets is that I interact with the traffic in my lane and the lane next to me, and the traffic in the 3rd lane over, it's as though it doesn't exist. So to me, the feeling of 3 lanes is the same as the feeling of 2 lanes. So I give it a level of stress 2. I don't know. In your experience and in the experience of Portlanders, do they complain that they feel stressful on those streets?
They do. Some people do. We get complaints that a lot of people complain that we do a good job of bringing people to the downtown, and then they feel like we abandon them.
Yes. I can see that point of view too, and so that's something we'll have to work into to these criteria. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question about the data collection, which, as you said, sounded like it was intensive. Do you have a dollar figure on that component of the research in terms of the data collection?
Oh, actually, the data collection was not very intensive. The data collection was mainly it was getting the distance from the curb to the edge of the bike lane. So first of all, you only have to look at streets that have bike lanes, and well, in San Jose anyway, there aren't so many streets with bike lanes. I mean, there's a good number, but it's a small percentage of overall. And if you have somebody knowledgeable in the city who's been working on these bike lanes, often they just know it and they can just tell you. And the idea that you'd have to I've measured this block, now let me measure the next block. That's a waste of work if a consistent treatment was applied throughout. So it's not that much work to do the data collection. I couldn't give you that figure because this was our first time through doing it. We hired 2 students and probably what we paid them, I don't even have the budget. Probably it amounted to about $15,000 for the whole city. And because we were doing it the first time, we didn't do it as efficiently. We're sort of learning as we went. If we had to do it again, we probably could have done it even more efficiently. The other thing they were looking at was where these bike lanes approach an intersection. Looking at all those approaches. And again, if the city has a standard way of treating it, then you don't need a lot of data collection if you know what's going on. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if street maintenance levels play into your stress factor. We have a lot of streets in North Portland, for instance, that are unimproved at all. And because of, I don't know if it's the rain level or whatever, but I just avoid them at all, even though they may be classified as, a nice biking street based on their traffic volume and lanes and stuff like that.
So there are a lot of stressors besides traffic, which I didn't account for. Pavement is one. Crime is another one. Hills is another one. So it's conceivable to expand this framework to add those other factors. At this stage, I didn't, but that is a possible direction. Yes?
So in explaining why you went with the weakest link way to do it, you said that people are hesitant or won't go on a path if there's one section that's more dangerous than their comfort level. I'm kind of inclined to think that people will if there's just a short stretch that's more dangerous than they're normally comfortable with, and so I was curious what your response is to that, because you clearly have more experience and knowledge than I do.
Well, okay, I took that as a premise, and I didn't try to prove it, but I have experience with that. For instance, from where I live, I live less than a mile away from a beautiful bike path along the Charles River. To get to it, I got nice, quiet streets to get to, and then one horrible intersection. And that one horrible intersection, my wife says, forget it. I don't want to go. I won't go ride on the Charles River. It is a barrier that keeps her from getting onto that really beautiful path. Now, a rational person might say, sorry, dear. I wasn't aiming this at you. In general, a rational person might say, you can get around that low stress street. Just think of it like portaging a canoe. Just get off your bike, become a pedestrian. There are sidewalks there. Just walk along the sidewalk on that stressful block. Cross the street like a pedestrian would, a crossing here, wait on an island, wait till all the traffic is gone, then finally get from the island to the other side. And, as a pedestrian, it's a pain in the neck, but you could do it. But, if I told you I got a great canoe ride and you just have to portage over this difficult place, there are people who are willing to do that. But there's just something about, I'm not riding a bike anymore. And if that's what I have to do, forget it. I'll leave my bike at home. Bike riding, for most people, bike riding is discretionary. And if you have to fight to do it, they just don't want to fight. They want to relax and enjoy it. As the stressful segment gets shorter and shorter and shorter, well, okay, maybe. That's why I allowed the criteria for crossing. I allowed that people would cross something. They'd put up with quite a bit of stress in crossing a street if they had low stress on either side. So I made those criteria more relaxed than I'd like to. Yes, Peter?
You use traffic signals as a low-stress tool in this assessment.
Yes.
If my observations are correct, cyclists will make them higher stress because if we make them wait longer than a minute and a half, let's say, then they'll run the red light.
Yeah.
And so it becomes higher stress. So maybe talk about the importance of delay minimization for bicyclists at intersections and how you came to that conclusion that they are low stress. Because I think if it's raining and there is a lot of delay, then they become high stress.
Well, stress isn't everything for bicyclists. Delay is an important thing, too. So I didn't account for delay. So if the way that you have a low-stress route is go a block, stop sign, 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 I didn't account for that kind of stress in here, and that is real. So I didn't account for that. Likewise, at a traffic signal, if the green is 6 seconds long and to cross such a wide street that I can't even get across before the cross traffic is going, and that happens to me at night when I leave my work, because I don't have an in with the city traffic engineer. So there are some details to that I didn't cover, and the delay, a long delay of traffic signals also is is something that cyclists don't want to do. But that's not traffic stress. That's more like the delay. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you were considering using a model like this in Portland, do you think you would have to develop like a specific stress tolerance for bridges?
Why? Tell me what do you think about bridges and stress?
Well, I guess like from my personal experience, it's usually like the buses getting onto the bridges, and I don't know. I just feel like they are like this bottleneck that intimidates me, and I force myself through them. But like if I had to make my little route, it'd be like 111 and then 4, like right before a bridge.
So what the stressful part you're talking about is like the merges onto the bridge, not on the bridge itself, but the approaches. So, yeah, I've tried to account for the approaches. I didn't have something specifically in there, and somebody else has suggested that to me for wherever there are ramp type approaches where people can turn on to a street with some speed, and there's a fight as to who's got the right of way.
So we are at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to have to cut off the formal questioning. I want to remind the students in the room, check in with me for attendance before you leave. And those of you watching on the web, I only have one person who checked in on the web, and so either there's only one of you out there or there's a problem with the email, so you might want to email me directly as well if I didn't get you. Okay, thank you very much, Peter.